Helen stood in her kitchen, staring at a drawer that barely closed. Old receipts, broken pens, takeout menus from restaurants that didn't even exist anymore. How had she let all this pile up? She pulled out an old to-do list from years ago, half the items unfinished. A realization hit her like a freight train. It wasn't just the drawer. She had been holding on to things, clutter, guilt, expectations, that were weighing her down. At 70 plus, stress shouldn't come from the past cluttering up your present. It's time to let go. Today we're tackling 8 things that might be secretly stealing your peace. And the first, it's hiding in your home, in closets, drawers, and forgotten corners. 1. Clutter that no longer serves you. Helen sat on the floor, surrounded by a lifetime of things, some sentimental, some completely useless. A broken lamp from 20 years ago, a stack of yellowed newspapers she once thought she'd read, a box of clothes that hadn't fit since the late 90s. How did it get this bad? At first it was just a few things here and there. A sweater she planned to wear again, a gift she felt too guilty to donate. But over time, the weight of these things started creeping into her daily life. Closets became harder to manage, drawers overflowed, and the act of finding something simple turned into a full-blown treasure hunt. And that's when she realized, clutter wasn't just taking up space in her home, it was taking up space in her mind. Helen started small, 1 drawer, 1 shelf. With every item she let go of, she felt lighter, freer, and more in control. And when she finally donated that old lamp, she laughed, because in all those years, she had never once gotten around to fixing it. Letting go isn't losing, it's making room for the life you want now. 2. Guilt over saying no. Helen had always been the yes woman. Need a favor? She was your go-to. Want someone to bake cookies for the church event? She'd make 3 batches. Watching the grandkids last minute? Of course, but beneath that kindness was exhaustion. One evening, as she sat at the dinner table, her daughter called, "Mom, can you watch the kids tomorrow? I know it's last minute, but I need help." Helen's heart clenched. She loved her grandkids, but she had planned a quiet afternoon with her book and a cup of tea. But then Helen thought about how often she put everyone else's needs before her own. And at 72, hadn't she earned the right to set boundaries? So for the first time in a long time, she paused before answering. "I'd love to help, sweetheart, but I already have plans for tomorrow. Maybe next time?" Her daughter hesitated, then said, "No worries, Mom, I'll figure something out." And just like that, the world didn't end. But here's the truth. Saying no isn't rejecting others. It's honoring yourself. Helen learned that her time mattered too. She could still be loving and generous, but not at the expense of her well-being. And the best part? The more she practiced, the easier it became. And if the answer is no, she says no, without guilt, without apology. 3. Negativity from others. Helen had a friend, Martha, who had been in her life for over 40 years. They had shared so many laughs, so many memories. But in recent years, their conversations had taken a sharp turn. Every phone call with Martha felt like a drain on her energy. It was complaint after complaint, about her health, about politics, about her family. Nothing was ever good enough, and every solution Helen offered was met with, "Well, that won't work for me." One afternoon, after an hour-long call left Helen feeling exhausted, instead of uplifted, she had a hard truth to face. Not everyone who has been in your life for decades deserves a front-row seat to your happiness. But letting go of toxic relationships doesn't always mean cutting people off entirely. It can simply mean limiting time spent with those who drain you, redirecting conversations to positive topics, allowing distance to naturally reshape the relationship. Helen didn't want to hurt Martha, but she also didn't want to sacrifice her own peace. So she stopped answering every call. She suggested lighter topics. She kept conversations short. And gradually, she noticed something incredible. She felt happier, because when she removed negativity, she made more space for laughter, joy, and friendships that lifted her instead of pulling her down. 4. Unrealistic expectations of yourself. Helen stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her blouse. She sighed. She still had that little voice in her head, the one that whispered, "You should be able to do more. You used to be so much more active. You used to. That phrase had been haunting her for years. Used to be faster, used to be thinner, used to stay up late without feeling exhausted the next morning. But who said she had to keep up with her younger self? Aging wasn't a failure, it was an evolution. Yet Helen had been holding herself to the same impossible standards she had in her 40s and 50s. So she made a decision. She would stop competing with her past self. Helen started focusing on what brought her joy now. She swapped high-intensity workouts for gentle yoga. She traded late-night events for cozy evenings with a book. And instead of feeling like she had lost something, she realized she had gained something even better: peace. 5. And clothes that no longer fit or flatter. Helen stood in front of her closet, staring at a row of dresses that hadn't been worn in years. Some were too tight, some were out of style, and some, if she was being honest, were holding on to memories more than function. She pulled out a sequin dress from the 90s. She had worn it to a New Year's Eve party decades ago, dancing all night. She smiled at the memory, but as she held the dress up to herself, she knew that version of her life was in the past. But our wardrobes should celebrate the present, not the past. So Helen did something bold. She tried everything on. If it didn't fit, flatter, or make her feel good, it was out. The result? Helen's closet became lighter, easier to navigate, and filled only with things that made her feel fabulous. And that old sequin dress? It went to a thrift shop, where she imagined it would make someone else shine on their big night. 6. Worrying about what others think. Helen still remembered the first time she hesitated to wear something she loved, because she feared what others might say. It was a bright red lipstick. Years ago, she adored it, but she overheard someone whisper, "Isn't she a little old for that?" That day she wiped the lipstick off. For years, she let other people's opinions dictate her choices. She didn't dance at weddings because she didn't want to be the old lady on the dance floor. She avoided wearing bold colors because she didn't want to stand out too much. But one morning, as she sat drinking coffee in her kitchen, she had a thought that changed everything. What if I lived as if no one was watching? That day, Helen put on her brightest lipstick, and she didn't care what anyone thought. She danced at her granddaughter's birthday party. She started wearing whatever made her happy, whether it was a sequin top or cozy sweatpants, because at 72 she realized something freeing. The only opinion that truly matters is her own, and with that weight lifted, she finally felt free to live exactly as she pleased. 7. Holding on to grudges. Helen used to believe that holding a grudge meant standing her ground. If someone hurt her, she built walls, strong, unshakable walls, because forgiveness felt like letting them off the hook. But here's what life had taught her: those walls, they didn't keep the pain out, they kept her trapped inside. Take her old friend Margaret, for example. They had been inseparable for years, until a silly disagreement over a forgotten lunch date turned into years of silence. Margaret had apologized once, but Helen, still nursing the sting of disappointment, refused to let it go. Then, one afternoon, Helen saw Margaret across the grocery store aisle, older, a little slower, but still Margaret. She thought about walking the other way. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "It's been too long." Margaret's face lit up, and just like that, years of resentment melted into nothing. Helen learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pride. And once she did, she felt lighter than she had in years. 8. Fear of trying new things. Helen never thought she'd take up painting at 72. In fact, for most of her life, she told herself she wasn't the creative type. She'd watch other people, friends who played instruments, family members who danced, women in her community trying new hobbies, and she'd think, "That's wonderful for them. But I could never do that." Then one day, A friend invited her to a casual painting class at the local community center. At first, Helen almost said no. I'll look foolish. What if I'm terrible? But something inside her whispered, why not? And so, with zero experience and a whole lot of nerves, Helen picked up a paintbrush. Was she an instant Picasso? Not. Her first painting looked like a confused toddler had done it. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't care. Helen didn't need to be a great artist to love the process. She laughed, made new friends, and discovered a joy she never expected. And just like that, she realized that the only thing scarier than trying something new is never trying at all. Turns out, letting go isn't just about decluttering your closet. It's about decluttering your whole life. Less stress, more freedom, and zero energy wasted on things that don't matter. Sounds like a win to me. So tell me, what's one thing you're finally ready to ditch? Drop it in the comments, and let's celebrate some fresh starts together.